Welcome to the Afghanistan Project Podcast. I'm your host, Beth Bailey, and my guest today is John Moses, who a lot of you will probably recognize because we were on here just a couple weeks ago talking about the Massachusetts Afghan Alliance, which he co-founded, and that organization is supporting Afghan allies who have resettled around Massachusetts. John's also a 23-year veteran of the U.S. Army, a veteran fellow at the Hoover Institution, and the director of operations at Wizard Line Technologies Incorporated. Today, John, we're just going to delve into where you were during evacuation and kind of, before we started recording, I was saying I've only heard, kind of these broad overarching talks about where people were during those really harried weeks, and people weren't sleeping and people were exhausted, and I want to dive into those details, and you have been awesome enough to really get into the nitty-gritty. So I guess that would be a good place to start. Do you want to talk about what you've kind of mined in preparation for this and the interesting things that you've found?
Yeah, for sure. And just to start off, of course, thank you for having me. It's always great to be on the podcast with you. I often speak so highly of you out in the world and like, hey, you should check out the podcast. People subscribe to it now, and I'm really glad to be part of this. And also thank you for giving voice to these stories, because these stories are really important. And it's important that journalists and people that care about the integrity of what really happened hear these parts of these stories, and they do this. So I appreciate it. So how this actually started for me, I was stationed in Afghanistan in 2011 and 2012 at the United States Embassy, and I was really fortunate to have a really unique opportunity to work with the Afghan people, and somebody that I really cared about, two of the people I actually really cared about, Masood and my friend Najim, both reached out to me and said, hey, I have family still in Afghanistan. They were in the United States. And how my journey kind of started was on August 16th, 2021, I woke up ready to go to work for the day. I was working at this new job in Boston. I get up. I hadn't kept up with Afghanistan. My people were in the United States. They were citizens. And so for me, Afghanistan was kind of in the past. I didn't ever expect to do more. I didn't expect to do any of these things. So, and I get a message, and it says, the first message I got was at 3 a.m., and it was, Sergeant Moses, please help my family. And I just responded, absolutely, tell me what to do. And I went to work that day, and I remember I went to work, and I talking to my friends, and I was like, and I remember thinking about it, I'm like, okay, well, what can I do? Who do I know? And I showed up at this office, and I remember, man, I had some real E7 bravado. I walked in, I'm like, I'm saving that fucking guy's family. I don't give a shit, rah, rah, rah. And so, but I thought, I didn't understand what a cataclysmic event was about to rain down on us, right? So this first day, I'm like, F yeah, let's do this, calling people I know, making connections with people I knew at the embassy and all that. In those first 3 or 4 days, I was really alone. I was alone trying to work on this stuff. First day was really easy-ish, right? I'm stressed out. I remember they sent out they sent out the visa that everybody was supposed to use at the gate. And I was holding it secret, and I was like, don't tell anybody. And then 7,000 people got it those first couple days, right? And they weren't letting people in with it and all those things. So those days started getting harder, and I was still by myself. And really for me, though, I was actually at my business partner's house with him and his wife when President Ghani flew out of the country, and I collapsed. And I still really don't love thinking about that particular moment, because I knew what it meant, right? There was no question, things were getting bad and things were getting hairy and people were panicking. But President Ghani, the leader of the country flying out, was the end. And I knew it was the end of the country, I knew it was the end of the republic, and I knew everything that was coming from that point on had a deadline, and it was August 31st, which ended up not being true, but that's what I thought at the time.
Yeah, and it's so funny because it's like, Ghani, how dare you? But then if you look at the pictures of what happened to the previous Afghan president, right, who got strung up and just mutilated during the takeover, right?
Yeah. No, I understand, and I understand that he was afraid, but you know who else was afraid? Afghan people.
All
right?
of the Afghan people
right.
who were then, so many were.
There's a lot of people, and I think you've spoken to some of them, that will talk about a lot of the failure of the Afghan army was when Ghani flew, because they just knew. It was the same thing we all knew. We all knew what that meant. In my life, I never expected to witness, never mind be part of such a historic storm of events, that just perfect storm of events that came up and like swallowed my life.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm so with you, because I couldn't look at it. I think we talked about this on your episode too. I couldn't look at it for the longest time. It was killing me.
Yeah.
And then people needed help, and I was like,
right.
oh man, all right, Tom Schumann, your interpreter needs to get out. I'll raise awareness in the media. And from there it became, well, my interpreter needs help too, and mine. And unlike you, I couldn't make those contacts. I couldn't get anybody to, I couldn't get into those Signal chats. I did not even know they existed. So tell me about where it changed from you being by yourself to being part of that community and breaking in.
Yeah. So that was actually, this is probably the best thing I ever got. And I love the people that I came out of Evac with. And so how this ended up working out is I was trying to get rides for people. So I was trying to arrange rides throughout Kabul to the airport. I was working with some people down in North Carolina. Like I had some stuff that was like I was trying to get set up. And it was one person. There's a woman that I still work with. She lives in Alexandria. I won't name her, but she actually I can. I name her in interviews all the time. So her name's Liesl Bogan. So Liesl she's got a former diplomatic background, and I would be like, hey, I need to try to get a ride for this. I was working on an American citizen case, and she'd be like, I'll be right back, and she'd show up 10 minutes later with the ride, and I was like, wait a minute, she's absolutely reliable. She keeps showing up like with stuff, and so we ended up like becoming friends. And then all of a sudden, out of the sky, my friend Alicia shows up, who I actually served in European Command with. She shows up and she's like, my interpreter is stuck in Turkey. He's an American citizen, and his whole effing family is in Kabul. We need to get him out. And she had heard through the grapevine that I'd been doing the work, because other people from my military background heard that I was doing this work and then started reaching out to me. And that's how the team started coming together. Liesl was kind of the first, and then her, and then we brought in this guy, Ben, who was this great lawyer that eventually helped us do all this paperwork. And then this guy, we call him Johnny Danger, who lived out in Hawaii at the time, and he would pull like our third shift. But we ended up with this really loose group of people, just like everybody else did, and that's kind of how we came together. And it was the right combination. So my job was people on the ground. I was the case manager. I moved people. I made sure you were safe. I made sure you didn't hit roadblocks. Lisa was the diplo side, because she had diplomatic skills, and I just yelled at people, totally different skill. And then Alicia was just a worker, right? She's a worker. She's actually one of the first infantry officers in the Army. Like, she's really she's a badass woman. She does a lot of really great things. I would love for you to meet her, actually. So. Oh yeah. But these people came together. We locked together arms, and we were just like, we're just going to work, and we're going to work. So we ended up we called ourselves, and I'll tell you the brief story. We were called the Evac Fellows. And the reason we were called the Evac Fellows, because I was stuck in this group with all these geniuses, right? All incredibly smart people, and they're like, I'm this fellow, and I'm that fellow. And I was doing a fellowship with Stuff and Fluff, and I was like, well, I don't know what an effing fellowship is, but we're the Evac Fellows. That's our new name. And it kind of stuck. And from that time on, we were the Evac Fellows, and our motto was get shit done. Like, find a solution, execute, see if it works. If it doesn't work, back up, find another solution. And that's what we did for 2 weeks. All the hours, the same hours other people. And again, we weren't alone. Thousands of people just like me and Liesl and Alicia and Johnny Danger did all this stuff, right? So it was really good. It was amazing that it happened that way, for sure.
I like that now you're a fellow. So like,
yeah, now
it just took you a little while to catch up and be a fellow with the Evac Fellows. So it hit you too. It just a little later. That's pretty funny. So then, what about the cases that you were working? Tell me about what kinds of people needed help getting out, and what were their situations like? How many successes do you have? I know you have called the stories, and I know you have a lot of them, so I just want you to be able to tell those.
Yeah, so over that 2 weeks, the Evac Fellows ended up getting 68 people out through the airport. The number's higher than that. Some of us did some stuff on our own, but for, like, as a group, that's what we kind of felt was the fair, documentable number. And at that point, we were kind of keeping track. We had several kinds of families. So the first family I wanted to talk about, and this is some of the stuff I was digging around and looking at photos, and it was the first time I've looked at some of those photos for a while, and it's still jarring. Some of it's still jarring. But So the first family was actually 4 families of interpreters. It was 4 sets of interpreters that somebody from UCOM had reached out and said, "Bro, my interpreter's there, and he was at the presidential palace, like he had been private, he had been doing all the things, and he was friends with all of his friends were interpreters and all their families, and so he was the first family we found, and that was actually the first family we were able to get out through the whole process." But that family had a real struggle. They were moving around Kabul frequently. They struggled with the fact that for a while the gates were only open to Americans. A lot of the work I did was keeping them like sitting in the same space, right, and not moving while we're trying to work on paperwork or find flights. That particular group, we ended up working with No One Left Behind, actually. So No One Left Behind, I owe an incredible, and a lot of these families owe an incredible amount of gratitude towards. No One Left Behind actually chartered a flight, and this is my prop, and this is the memo. Obviously, this isn't the memo they had, but this is the No One Left Behind memo, and this has 25 people on it, and that's 25 names. So those are 25 like legacies and things that are going to go on, and this fucking thing got 25 people on a plane 30 seconds after they got into the airport. So like miracles. So that's how we got them out. So how we got them in was because of Alicia's amazing work with the DOD and finding an active duty first sergeant that was willing to help us inside the airport. And that guy saved hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Afghans.
Wow.
Yeah. Wild stuff. It was a long, and if you want, there was some real low points and high points to that. There were points we thought we were going to get them in a gate and it didn't get out. The gate got locked down. This family probably had the best fortunes of all, though, and it ended on a funny note. Of all things, it made us laugh harder than you would ever imagine. He was at the shit trench. Everybody was at the shit trench. Mm-hmm. So he's at the shit trench, and I'm like, and I hadn't seen photos of where he was yet, so I didn't understand exactly what he was talking about. But all of a sudden, he's like, I start getting messages. He's like, so we're telling him, hey, there's a guy behind the wall. He's got a green light, and he's pointing it towards you. Like, we're trying to coordinate to feel these people. And he sees the light and just jumps into the shit trench, like swan dive.
Oh, no.
I just imagine him swan diving in. And he's like, I'm in the water. And I'm like, and I didn't know what water he was talking. I'm like, why are you wet? What the fuck are you talking about? Is it okay if I swear? I feel like this is good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm like, what are you talking about? And then all of a sudden it goes silent. And then 30, 40 seconds later, there's photos of them inside the airport. And I remember, like, we were laughing so hard. Because of, why were you in the water? We didn't understand. And then he was out, and it was like this wave of relief. And the biggest part of the relief was I knew how to get fucking people out. We knew. We were like, we have a path. And then we had the second group, which we tried the similar type of methodology in the same kind of context. And that one failed and ended up ending at Abbey Gate. So that was kind of the second big family that we used that route for. And then we had other routes, and we could talk about those families. I have some American citizens that we helped, stuff like that, for sure.
Oh, wow. Yeah, before we do that, I want to ask.
Yeah.
Every time you faced failure, especially in those first couple days when it was just you, why didn't you quit?
I mean, hey, can you save my life? And then you say yes. Like, what do? You say, go F yourself? Like, so, like, you're just like...
Sorry,
Well, that and the moral injury, and, like, I really went into it. I bottomed out. I bottomed out, and what was powering me was sheer, like, fear, PTSD. I remember one of the families, it was actually in the group that got out, they actually, she was like, the Helen of Troy, like, there was this woman, she's like, my family's all about to go through the gate, like, can you, because she was a teacher, her and her brother, she knew what was coming, and she had, she'd sent this picture, and she had this beautiful red hijab, and she was gorgeous, and she's actually in that photo I sent you earlier, and her and her family, I was like, we're getting those because she would have been alone, she got on a plane, but, like, talk about, and I've met her. She's they're out in California. They're doing well. She just got married. She's having a baby. Oh, she's got a 7-month-old. She's got a little American baby, right? And she just would have anyway. So that was so you did it because people needed your help. I mean, that was it. You were just obligated. The obligation was there. You had a duty to people, and I just couldn't imagine. I always said to Afghans, like, we didn't. we weren't going to do to you what the Russians did or the British did or all the other people did, and we fucking did it. And we just did it. We just did it in the worst way, and like everybody knew the consequence for all the people that were going to stay behind. So that's why I kept doing it. I just didn't really have a choice. I don't feel like, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really hard to be impotent at the time, and at least if you're trying, you know, like I was just sitting there sharing everything that came across my screen, you know, like constantly looking at the news to see what's happening and then sharing it with everybody, the very small number of people at the time who follow me on Instagram, because it's like, well, I have to do something, you know, I've got to tell some story some way. And
right.
It was such a hard time. So what were some of the, you know, the routes that you used then to get people outside of the ones that, like, what gates did you use?
Yeah. So we got 2 people through, not Abbey Gate. So there was another entrance point on that wall, and not a lot of people knew about it, and including the Afghans. So we got 2 through, it was near Abbey Gate, but I have the maps, but it was essentially, so somewhere near Abbey Gate. We got somebody through Westgate. We got somebody through North. And I think we got some, and there's probably one other gate I'm forgetting. But I know for sure, we actually didn't end up getting anybody through Abbey before it blew up. We got close on Abbey. We got really close on Abbey with 10th Mountain Division. Those are some of the units we worked with. We worked with 82nd, we worked with 10th Mountain Division. We were doing work with soft teams. We got connected. A lot of that was through the Slack channels. I don't know if people remember, there was actually Slack. There was an entire Slack environment that some unbelievable group of veterans put together, and it managed the entire event. Like that was like the global management hub, and it's been shut down, obviously, so it's long gone. But yeah, we got those tools are what we used. On our team, we had an imaging guy. So imaging guy. One time we had a family that was lost, and we're like, I can't figure out where because his ping was wrong or something, and I was like, where the F are you? And our dude B, I can't say his name. I definitely can't say his name. So B, I'm like, yeah. B, like, I can't figure out what this dude is. He goes, tell the guy to take a selfie. Make sure there's a bunch of buildings behind it. I'm like, okay. And so, like, you know, he does it. So I send the picture, right? And I'm like, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but whatever. And so B grabs it, and he goes, hold on, I got to make this unclassified. And then 5 minutes later, a picture shows up, and he's like, he's right here. And he's within, like, a 50-meter circle. And I was like, what the fuck? And so there were people like that helping. There were people like that could literally use keyhole satellites and do all kinds of things, unclass them, and help. And that stuff really helped. And then the people behind the wall, those absolute goddamn heroes behind that wall, that were behind that airport, that were just holding up that last little bit of this foolish enterprise into building a country, right?
Oh, I can't even imagine. How did you get? Was B giving you the maps of the area to begin with, or did B work for NGA? We
could talk later about.
Okay, all right.
I don't know.
I'm so curious.
I have to look who he works for now. I know who he.
Okay.
But well, we can talk off camera on that one for sure.
Okay.
So in that case, so we had him also as the case manager, as the guy working the stuff on the ground. My role is to make sure they would get there safely, to make sure they had a place to stay, if they had to need a safe house, if they were doing all that kind of stuff, while other people were doing Diplo work or whatever. So sometimes it was maps. So sometimes B would be giving us maps. Sometimes Alicia would be communicating to our contacts on the inside of the warehouse of the airport. We also had connections at the Westgate. We had a Marine connection at the Westgate. That was how we got that family out. And boy, I'll tell you, if I ever find that little E4, I think it was an E4 or an E5, bro, that guy's never buying a beer near me again.
Who was it? Do you remember his name?
Don't know his name.
What?
That's the thing, is I don't remember. It could probably be worked out, though.
I can almost bet you if you could remember a last name or like anything about him. We had one guy who got out I don't think I ever... Well, Michael and I were using our connections from here to try to get an Amnesty International researcher who got out. He remembered, I think, he was a combat engineer. He remembered that, and he remembered like his his rank or something.
Yeah.
And we found him. He just didn't want to come on, which I totally respect. But like, we found him.
I still have a lot of those chat conversations, but that was an interesting story. The Westgate exit was, but that's what the case manager did. So we managed,
Yeah.
a lot of the things was like managing paperwork. The thing I think people don't realize is the flood of paperwork, like how much paperwork affected us. So I remember hand jamming shit on spreadsheets over and over and over and over and over again. And every new group wanted a new spreadsheet, and like that's where the guy Ben came in. So Ben was an active duty officer that was also a lawyer. And so he was actually, I think, a reservist at the time when this finally happened. He was coming close to retirement. So he took all of his interns that were going to, like, they were all going to ROTC. And so he said, I'm not going to write, well, he didn't say this. He was probably positive. But I imagine him being like, listen, mother effers, you want a good ROTC review? You're going to do paperwork. And that guy processed, tens of thousands of paperwork, like pieces of paperwork, got them on spreadsheets. He submitted them. And through all that work, through the thousands of names we submitted and tried to help, to varying degrees. Some we had to prioritize just like everybody else. So we decided to prioritize SIVs. You know why I didn't prioritize LPRs? Because we figured they were going to have an easy way out. Boy, was I effing wrong. Who knew, right? So everybody had to make choices, and you had to try to get people out. And my friend Masood, the first person that asked, we didn't get his brother out. He was in that second group that when Abbey Gate blew. That was when I started getting photos. Thank God his family was okay, but he since escaped Afghanistan. He's not doing great. He went off, and his story is really tragic. I did a lot of therapy because of what happened with Basir, is his name.
Oh. Which country did he escape to?
He went to Pakistan, but he's probably the unluckiest Afghan I've ever met. Like, he gets to Pakistan, and they had the huge floods, and then last I heard, they were stranded, and then it's. The thing with that particular case that was really hard for me was this particular family didn't put the same effort the interpreter's family put in. A lot of the reason, nobody saved a single Afghan. Nobody went to Afghanistan and saved anybody. It was the Afghans that had to find their way through. All you could do was put the breadcrumbs out.
Yeah.
And one set of family, that the difference between success between those first two groups, one success story was because they went out. I said, I need you to scout the wall. I need you to do this. I need you to make sure this is done. I need you to make sure you know what everybody's wearing so I can communicate it. I need photos. I need proof of life. And they did everything. And this other family didn't. And when it finally came down to brass tacks, I said, I need you to scout that wall. If there was an orange placard on that wall. I still remember the orange placard. Like, I need you to know where that is because he's going to tell you where to go. And they didn't do it. And then when he told them where to go, they're like, we don't know where to go. And they never made it in the water. And he had to move on to another family because everybody had to make choices. And then Basir, that failure really lived with me for a long time. I had to really work on because that's my friend's brother. And it was really, I'm good now and I'm better now. But at the time, Basir, and then having him to continue to fail, he should be here. He should be here. He was 30 feet away from the first sergeant. And he missed it because he didn't know where the sign was. So that's how it goes. And the bigger point of that, though, Basir was part of a bigger group. So the 4 families in the first group, there were 5 families in the second group that didn't get out because the next day, Abbey Gate, right? And so the gate's closed forever.
Yeah. Oh, God. Hearing you talk about it just reminds me of all the things I've had to close myself off to for the past, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Because the trauma for me started later. But, it's as you're going through this, I wondered, there are a couple of things I want to explore here. First of all, I'm thinking about, you're looking at all this information now and you know everything that you know now that you didn't know then, right? So that's got to be a mind fuck first. And then I'm thinking about, when I started, I did a little bit of work with Operation 620, or I was in contact with them as I was trying to find out. I had this one man reach out to me and he had been part of NDS. Very excellent English. He had an internship with a renowned Afghan institution, but as an intern, he was not eligible for P1 or P2. And we were just going through everything to try to figure out what he could do. Could he apply for humanitarian parole? Could he do whatever? Because for an NDS employee, he was in serious crisis mode. The Taliban had called him into the office. His sister was in trouble. Everything was going wrong. And all the time, I'm just in contact. And then there was the opportunity for him to go to Pakistan. And I'm thinking, actually, I don't think that's the option for you. There is nothing processing there. There's nothing happening. And now I know there really was nothing processing there. And there was no shot for him to get P1 or P2. So going there would have just been like, oh, you're going to spend an exorbitant quantity of money for fucking nothing.
Nothing.
I usually don't curse on this podcast, but like, it's angry. Like, it's angersome. It makes me angry to think about how deeply that impacted me, where, you know, I'm hearing all these things. And then, like, there's a lovely woman. She told me her whole story. She was child bride, abused by her husband, got away from him because of a divorce, and she just now got a Brazilian pass. And I have said so many times, don't do it. Don't do the Brazil route. Don't do the Brazil route. And I know what she's going to do. And it's like, fuck, man, all these stories, all these people, they live in your heart. You can't help them all, but you never forget. You know, you just kind of go about things and pretend like they don't exist. So my diatribe, let's go back and say, what is it like for you now, looking back, especially with the amount of trauma that you dealt with because of that, knowing now everything that you didn't know then?
Say that question one more time.
Yeah. So you're looking back now, you're looking back through these stories.
Yeah.
You have, at the time, like, you know, the messages you're reading, you've got like imperfect knowledge of all the other stuff that's going on. So what's it like now to look back and to have a much better idea?
Yeah, in reflection, so I've had a lot of time to chew on this. Sometimes some of it in some pretty dark places. I think what's the word I'm looking for? One of the things that I think I realized, and you know, you have these kind of like epiphanies when you're doing work. I'll tell you, you know what? I'll tell you a few things looking back. One of the things I can tell you for sure is that, you know, people will talk about miracles. People can talk about miracles all they want. Miracles are hard fucking work. Period. I don't care what miracle was in that Bible. I do care. I care that the miracles, but you know what? It also required, like, okay, you split the Red Sea, cool miracle, bro. Now you got to roll across the sand, and you got to get people to actually cross between the two giant mountains, right? It's a lot of work. Miracles are hard work. And the other thing that I want to say is that I know whatever the number originally came out for us, when I would say, you know, we held 68 people. And, you know, people would be like, that's a miracle. And I was like, it's 68 miracles. What I figured out, because there was so many failures too, there's many more failures than there were successes. What I figured out was that there were so many places that these could fail that they all had to succeed in order to get those people out. And any one of them, every single one of those people that got out was a miracle, because anything could have happened at any point. It was pure chaos. And I think that's a big part of it. I had a real epiphany about names. I think during the process of, I'll tell you a really interesting, I don't know if it's interesting. I've never actually told this story to anybody. I think it's interesting. There was this.
Then it will be interesting.
It might be interesting. So I'll just tell you one of the epiphanies I had in the middle of it, which I think is kind of pertinent to what I was just going to say. In the middle of Evac, you know, one of these late night 2 a.m. mornings, I remember I'm working on the phone with, you know, the group of my people on the Evac fellows. And it's really dark time, right? This is when only the U.S. citizens are coming out. Like, we know that people aren't coming. People are really on you, right? They're emailing you things. And one of the things we were talking about, the paperwork. And I remember, like, typing up all these names, right? Typing up people, right? And and this family, the Gauci family, the Hadi family, this family, like the Sadat family. There's all these families, and there was all these names. And, you know, when you're in Afghanistan, you hear names, but, like, they're not, like, something you focus on all the time. And I remember while we were doing this, I remember really clearly as I'm typing these names down, somebody was like, hey, are we going to take this other family? And I was like, you know what, we're going to take them. And I was like, put it on the list. We're not going to say no to anybody. And we didn't. We didn't turn anybody down. And I remember as we're doing that and we're starting to write the names down, as clear as a bell, as clear as it might as well have been in the room. Remember the scene from Schindler's List with the typewriter when he's typing and Schindler is just yelling over and over, like, and he's frantic, more names. And that's what we were doing. That's what Evac people were doing. We were, like, trying to rescue people, like, and that was really hard. And I heard it, and it was in the room, and it was like, so loud and not disturbing. It was so loud and just there and present. And I just remember being like, holy shit, that's what we're doing. And like, everything like retreating and then like going back to it because it was all you could do. You just had to keep doing the work. And I never forgot that. I never forgot that when I went to Krakow and I went and saw the Schindler's Factory and all those things. I mean, that's what we were doing. Those spreadsheets were the same thing as Isaac Stern's typewriter, right? That's what we were all doing.
I messed this up on Jessica Walton's podcast, so I'm going to say it right here. And my best friend would always tell me this, like, whoever saves a life is a Jewish proverb. Whoever saves a life saves a world entire. 68 lives, 68 worlds entire, 68 miracles. Like,
right.
And you're right. And when I started working with, actually, when I first started writing about evac work ongoing, in fact, here's a funny story I've never told on the podcast. My first article that I wrote about Digital Dunkirk in like November, I had somebody accuse me of plagiarism because they'd already written about Digital Dunkirk, and then it was done. And I got highly irate and made sure that the publication knew that that was what their editors were saying. And like, this shit's still going on, bro. But I was a little aside, a little dig there. I was too close to my sources, I was told. And it's like, you're fucking damn straight I am. You're damn straight, because every one of them is a human being. And now, do you know what they're all doing? They're all sending me their papers, their most important papers, to my inbox because they're hoping that I will save their life. So, fuck you.
Yeah.
Right in the ass. Like, I was so disgusted by that. Right. Because, yeah, these are all humans. And I printed them all out because my intention was to write a book about that.
Yeah.
About getting, like you talk about, getting sucked into this. It was a vortex. Yeah. And to me, it's like, what am I going to do? Your description of Schindler's List, it's like, where are you going to be?
Right.
When the hard times come for another human? Are you going to sit there and say, well, it's not happening to me and I'm very sorry and I'll tell people it's bad? Or are you going to try to make it better? And right. That was where I wanted to make it better. Craziness.
We all knew that we had the right capabilities and the right people to get people out. And it would have been like what we were taking away from the Afghan people, for me, I had never witnessed an injustice like that. I had never been part of an injustice. That was the word. When Kabul fell, it was like an injustice to the Afghan people, and there was no reconciling that in a way that didn't involve me like giving because every life that you get out, right, matters, and it always mattered, and it did matter, and those lives mattered, and those 20 years we gave them mattered. And the freedom we gave those women mattered, and all the things in the futures that they weren't going to be able to have now matter. And it still matters to me, and it still matters to people like you and all of those people. But I was really disappointed with that. I was really disappointed with the lack of accountability towards it. I think I'm still kind of on the boat. We talked about this on the last podcast, where, I was really proud of the work we did. I was really proud of every veteran I worked with and every diplo and journalist, and we did something really like incredible. Like, it was really something incredible. And I remember, the president coming out and speaking, directly to the country after the, August 31st, which, by the way, after August 31st, the work didn't stop. We kept getting people out after, and it was still hard, and it's still hard now. But he got out on that podium, and I remember him very distinctly saying, for all those people that helped, you're going to hear from me real soon, right? Never heard from him. And, he had an opportunity that year to do it during the State of the Union. He chose not to. And you only really talk about the things you're proud. And at the end of it all, like, I just think we need some more accountability. I'd love to see more accountability come out of the Afghanistan Commission because it did real damage. And that was real work we did. That was really hard work we did because the government failed to do theirs.
And I always heard people say, and I know neither of us really wants to get political here, so this is not an attempt to get political, but I think a lot of people felt that Biden didn't want to talk about the failure of Afghanistan because he didn't want to harm re-election prospects, or like, something of that nature. And now that we know that he's not going to run, I mean, do you think, it's like, I keep wondering, when is the time when you can say this for all the veterans who need to hear it, who have felt the burden of that failure when it's not their failure and they did fight valiantly? Like, do you think that I mean, I am sure that you think that it would be a great time for him to still stand up. Like, there is no time limit on this. Like, I feel like I'm quoting Benjamin Button right now. Like, there's no time limit. You can do it anytime. Like, come on, Biden, we need you.
I did want to talk about, if you're interested, an
Yes.
American citizen that actually has just arrived in the United States a few months ago.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Wait, somebody was an American citizen stuck in Afghanistan for all of that time?
Yeah, just until like 3 or 4 months ago, yeah.
Are you kidding me? Yeah, I mean, I want to hear that, and then I want to go back and hear the Westgate story. Like, there are lots of things that we have, because we've just been going in like a fun loop, and I loved it. It was an enjoyable loop.
I would rather not talk too much about politics, just because it's
Yeah, we don't have to. No, let's do. Tell me about the American citizen.
Yeah, so we had this family way back when I was starting to do learn about snatch missions. We had a family that actually was a bunch of green card holders and 2 American citizen kids. The wife was like 8 months pregnant though. So the reason they didn't go out and they made a choice. So again, everybody makes choices in these things, right? So when we say like everybody's got to make the choices that are right, they didn't go out through the American gate when it was kind of that time frame to go through, right? They didn't do that because they wanted to bring their mother, who was alone, right? They wanted to bring the sisters, who would have been alone. And so they made a choice. They said, we're not going to go through that gate. We have the blue passport. We're not going to do it. So they tried to get through through like the actual, like the miserable, terrible process at the wall. So this family with their 8-month pregnant wife ended up doing the wall run for, that 48 hour period, would go home, they'd rest, they would come back, and they ended up not making out, despite a lot of efforts from a lot of different people. That family actually didn't make it out of Afghanistan. They didn't get on the plane. They failed their last mission. We tried to send a car to their house, and they were suspicious. And some of the cars actually were pretty compromised. We found out later. So it could have been bad, but unbelievably, that family didn't arrive in the United States. So these 2 American kids, right? They have these 2 American children, which I think are going to be the way out for them. And eventually, they didn't arrive until 2024, about 3.5 months ago. So throughout that time, that family actually had one of the most difficult processes you can imagine. So they have 2 American kids. The wife has the baby, right? There's no way out at this point. I can't get them out. It's past August. They have the baby, who's of Afghan birth, and they are suddenly now at the whim of the State Department, and no longer it doesn't really matter. What I learned is, even if you have American kids, it's no guarantee you're getting on a plane, because you're a green card holder, and your status is the one that matters. So at the end of it all, these kids were trapped in Kabul. It took a year before we figured out what we had to do with their case, which actually we had to reopen, which is really rare, an SIV case from like 18 years ago and add a new derivative to it. And so we know somebody helped us, because that's not something that actually State Department typically does. And it's actually not something that's normal, right? To open up an old SIV, because he's a green card holder at this point. So they had to go all the way back in his history. We had to get a green card, get his SIV open, add them as a derivative. Took all the normal amount of time to get him through the process. And those 2 American, and I want to give a great thanks to a couple people at CARE, and they know who they are if they watch this, because they did help. We did get them to Qatar. And then what do you think happened? How long do you think they were in Qatar for?
8 months.
Yeah, 7-8 months, something like that.
Wow.
So we're like, okay, they have American citizens in their group. They're going to an American base. They waited in every IOM line because they have one person. And wait till you hear the end of the story. This is the crazy stuff, right? So they have to wait in the 4-hour line for IOM. And, there are a lot of people that will say, they say the conditions in Qatar are great and they're good. And I'm sure that they do a lot for people. But when you're there for 8 months, it's like being deployed, right? There's nothing there you ever want to see again. They go through the whole process. They ended up sticking all of them in one shoe with all of their bags. They couldn't get a second room, despite the fact that they had adults and kids. It was, so they were treated like, they were not treated like American citizens. They actually were denied their rights for quite a long time, and there's other people looking at that. So we finally get the one child through the entire process to get approved. and they call the United States and they call the resettlement agencies, and I won't say which one, but they wouldn't accept this family because they only had one member that was eligible for benefits. So do you guess who had to assure the family, otherwise they wouldn't come back to the United States?
You?
Full circle. Like, so we've been paying rent for these guys, food. Big shout out to Op Rico, who would know who these people are, because they had a case manager that helped. Her code name is Amy. She's out somewhere in the world, and Amy really managed that family intensely for that time. I helped with money. We helped with political things. We wrote letters to Congress people. But that story goes all the way back to August 17th, 18th, to 2021. And now they're in Virginia. Still struggling with the resettlement process, but at least they're here. The 2 American kids are here, and they're all excited to be here. So that's one of the longer stories we've had. Yeah, and he came to Massachusetts. I got to meet them. We got to greet them at the airport. It was really, because I assured them they got to come to Massachusetts first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm just astonished.
It was brutal. I didn't think it was fair. We, thankful for that one person on the care team, but I'll tell you, like, having 2 American citizens should be a real red flag that maybe when they get to a place that the Americans control, they take better care of those people. Those children were denied their American rights, right, for a long time, and I understand there should be, and this is my political opinion and my legislative opinion, there should be an emergency hatch for parents that are, like, if the country collapses and the government goes away, and you have 2 American kids and you're an LPR, there should be a, like, break glass emergency thing, but there isn't right now. So that's how they...
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's like when I was talking to Amy Sins, she came on, she's been on twice, and she was talking about a list that she's made for any American or anyone with any kind of ties to America about if you're traveling, here are things, even if you think you're in a safe place, here's what you need to have. Here's what you need to keep with you and be aware of, because things like this happen. Yeah. And... It's just,
It happens. And then, so I know 2 women that are actually going back. This is wild. I know 2 Afghan women going back to Afghanistan. And I was like, I was like, give me your passport. Like, send me a picture of your passport right now. They registered. They're doing it. They're going back. They're trying it.
Why?
Family. It's always family, right? So, but I have a copy. But, yeah, so that's kind of my long-term American citizen story. That was a really hard win, and it took us a really long time. And actually, if you count those people, so sometimes we add to the number. We're like over, like, because when we get like another group out, like we would get the LPRs out. That was a group we had a really smart Afghan that after the gate closed, all these LPRs, they were sleeping like in a park, and I was like, you're not sleeping in a park, and I actually rented a hotel in Afghanistan for them. Rented a hotel for both families. And I was like, and we had this one clever dude. His name's Abdul Jalil, and he is this most clever SOB. I love him. He's my favorite. He went to every... So this is after the 31st, so he can't... There's no exit, right? But he's an LPR, and all he needs to do is find a visa somewhere that can get him to the U.S. And he goes to every single travel agency he can find, and he finds enough visas for that small group of people. So we used hotel points in Turkey, sent him to Turkey, and we bought his tickets in Turkey. And then this is the funniest part of the story, though. So we're helping Abdul and these little families and stuff, and we're like, all right, you guys got enough to eat, da-da-da-da-da. And we're like, when are you flying to the U.S.? And he's like, oh, I actually delayed my flight so I can get hair plugs. And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, you're no longer a case. If you're getting hair plugs and teeth work in Turkey, apparently it's a good value, though. It's fairly a good deal.
Oh, my God. Well, if I ever need hair plugs, I'll...
Yeah. So I was like,
head on out.
You're no longer a client. But he's a great dude. I've met him in California. He gives me a big hug when I see him, and I'm like, you clever son of a bitch. Like, went out and found me, I think it was like 10 or so visas out in the field. Great dude.
Wow.
That's how it all worked, though.
Amazing.
I mean, we had dudes, during the height of it, we had dudes running like, I had guys going out taking pictures of roadblocks. We had public source information in that Slack channel, so people were posting photos like, hey, don't go down this street. They had active maps where, like, these are where the checkpoints are. So throughout that time, like, you had to work with other people, and you had to find people that had information that you could use. It was fun.
For sure.
I don't know if it was fun, but when somebody got out, it was fun. It was really like, thank God, like validating maybe.
Sure, and like hindsight makes it that way too, because then like even for the stories that were bad, at least there's not like, your friend's brother who's in Pakistan, he is alive.
Yeah.
Which is a better outcome than what a lot of us expected was going to happen to anyone.
Yep.
And everyone that the Taliban were angry with. And they are slowly going after them.
Nope.
Absolutely. And continuing to do that. But now it's much easier for it to be fun in memory now. Yeah. And those, I wanted to ask you, first I'd love to hear the Westgate story. Okay. And then I'll ask you about you.
That's a whole family. So that was Alicia's family. They're down in D.C. too. They're actually down by Williamsburg, by where your family is. I think you mentioned you travel.
Oh, cool! Yeah.
So, yeah, I actually love. Just before we get into the story, I love Williamsburg. So I spent a lot of time. I was in the transportation corps. So the little transportation corps logo up here.
Oh yeah.
And so there is a place called Fort Eustis, which is this tiny little post on the water, and it's walkable, so you don't need a car if you don't want one. And there's no generals there, and no sergeant majors, right? Sergeants, majors. So you can go there and just be kind of relaxed and it's a nice base. It's a nice post, and it's near Williamsburg, and it's really pretty. So anyway, but the story is, so they live there. So Alicia, when we first started doing the work, when she came on board, her, Johnny Danger, Ben, a few other people were like, hey, our interpreter, his name's Safi, and they were down in Kandahar, right? So they were doing the real shit. They were doing the real interpreter work down there. And Safi was their guide. And so over multiple tours, they had known Safi. Shows up, and he goes, while the country was collapsed, so he's an American citizen. His entire family is in Kabul for some kind of family event, right? Nobody knows, by the way, and this is part of the failure that I think is real, is why we were not getting people out sooner, and why were we not quietly pulling SIVs out of there. But so his whole family's there, and this American citizen flies all the way through, gets all the way to Turkey, and the airport shuts down, right? Whole family in Afghanistan, blue passport in Turkey. And he is apoplectic. Now, I want you to understand, so when I'm talking about first group, second group, we didn't do them in order, right? These were all at the same time. So Safi is apoplectic. He is spending time. Part of the job with Safi was being on the phone with him while he cried all night. And I remember he would just give up. My family's never coming out. God's given up on me, and he would just do it for hours. And I remember night after night, some nights it would be Ben, or some nights it would be Alicia. And I remember there were nights where we were just over and over, and I'd be like, Safi, I'm never going to let your family stay. Your family will be, we will Ben won't let it happen. Alicia won't let it happen. These people won't let your family stay. And so we go through all this work. We do a bunch of snatch missions that fail. Safi, every night, we're on the phone for hours. And finally, after a while, Alicia makes a contact at the Westgate with some Marines. I don't know, I forget how she gets there, but it doesn't really matter. She gets there, because we didn't really give a shit how we have an answer. And so we're trying to get him to Westgate. And I don't remember exactly how Westgate's set up, but I do understand that there's a door, and because we can't see any of this stuff. So we're going to go in by people's descriptions. But we know there's a camera that can see. And and this guy is I can see these people in the crowd. Now, you got to think, the husband's overseas, so you got the mom, the sisters, a couple of younger brothers at the time, and it's mostly and his elderly mother, whose father had died so Safi's dad had passed away. So he's got his whole family, right? And he gets up to the gate, the guys can see him on the camera, and he's like, you need to tell them right now that they have less than 2 minutes to get to this door, or we're closing this gate and it's done. And I remember Ben and Alicia screaming and yelling into the phone. They were yelling into the phone, Safi, they have to push. And apparently what happened was, and what the Marine relayed later was, that the mom just absolutely piled through, stiff arm her way to the front of that line and saved her whole fucking family. And not just their family that would have got out maybe later because he was a citizen, but the mom and the brothers and cousins, and we managed to, and the whole family got out. And I remember just absolutely when they got to the gate, how the release, and then Safi, his response to the whole thing. And when we met him, he cried and he cried. We went to a wedding down in Williamsburg, and those weddings wouldn't have happened. Those family members wouldn't have gotten out. So the mom, and actually, so the Safi family, so this is their card. And then the mom actually wrote, so somebody translated, and it says, in, it says it right here, but it says like, I'm very happy to have all my children around me. I'm very thankful. And like, she learned how to write that, like for our group. And like, that was
Wow.
cool. And so, but the thing I always got out of that was Afghan women are badass. So what I got out of that was like, don't mess with an Afghan woman because they knew what they were fighting for. They knew.
Yeah.
They knew.
Oh God, she had seen it. Think about what she had seen
I'll never
under the
forget.
previous regime.
I will never forget Ben and Alicia's the sheer desperation. Like they have to do it. Like if they don't do it, it's done. And it would have been done because it wasn't shortly after that. It was Abby. But yeah, it was a tough case. But now they're great, and they're in Virginia and they're Williamsburg, and he runs a successful business, and his kids are good. They're getting married. And he had his first kid because he didn't have kids yet. So he had his first American baby now, like with him and his wife, like who was stuck there, and like none of those things happen if like Alicia doesn't show up and we don't have all the right people and all the levers that we're pulling don't actually work, right? Like it was a wild time, and I was super glad to get him out of West. And that Marine, I owe beer forever, for sure. For sure.
I want to help you find that Marine so badly.
Like, do you remember that dude's name? Because we're gonna find him. I do know the first sergeant, and I can't say his name. He's asked not to be revealed, but he is a person I'm definitely gonna meet. And he's after the event. A lot of people I found out later were interviewed by the sergeant major of the Army, which is not common.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, like a lot of the senior enlisted were pulled in, and like it was a big deal. I mean, it was the failure of not a failure. It was the end of the war. I mean. The war was going to fail eventually, but it didn't have to do it like that. I also agree, though, it was the right thing to do. I think it was the right thing to do. I think it was the right thing to leave. I just wish we had started sooner, and that's all.
Yeah, and paid attention to the Taliban's power at the time.
Yeah.
We always underestimated the Taliban to our own detriment, and that is what disgusts me. And to the people who, you said it earlier, we promised them we were going to stand by them, and we failed to do that. And so we left with blood on our hands because we didn't do what we said. And I hate that we lied like that. And I hate that, I think the big thing for me, and I wonder if you had to watch this too. I'm sure you had to watch it. I hated knowing that the Taliban was pulling security. Mm-hmm. I hated it. It made me sick because these are the people who I had devoted my short-lived career to, knowing everything about, and now their dirty asses are freaking. I was sickened.
They were in charge of like the inflow and outflow. They were working, in which they had to do. Again, everybody has to make choices. The U.S. soldiers like this is bizarre. Like they've seen a bunch of the different documentaries, and actually the new one that came out, the one about the British experience, I think it's called Evacuation, is excellent. It's excellent. It's a lot about Abbey Gate because they were right next to Abbey Gate. Abbey Gate, their experience with the Marines after, like they treated a lot of the U.S. soldiers, Marines, and but that's a really good. I think it's Evacuation. I think it's on HBO Max, but it was a really good one. But I've watched all those, right? And to have to actually go out there and work with the Taliban must have been difficult. But I think also probably a lot of those people knew that this was the one way we were going to get as many people out as we could. And I think a lot of people that went to Afghanistan went more than once. I only went once, but a lot of people did go more than once. So for them, I think they knew. I just think everybody kind of knew what we were trying to do. So
yeah, it's interesting. I don't ever want to watch the documentaries, partially because I don't know that I want to see it firsthand, and partially because some of the HKIA veterans I've talked to, they're like, one in particular said he'd spent, I want to say 4 or 5 hours talking to documentarians. I don't think they used anything that he said.
We should do.
And he's one of the people. It's like
we should do something with this kid. There is a kid in my town. Listen to this. You want to hear some crazy shit? So I was here upstairs. So this is my office. I'm in a basement. Upstairs is my kitchen. This is okay. I don't know if you want to hear this, but this is bullshit right now. This is some bullshit. Right before Evac, I had torn this office down because I wanted to redo it. Right, and then Evac happened, and they didn't have a goddamn office. So I had to do all this in my kitchen. So I think one of the things I think Americans just generally don't realize, and people don't realize, is like how close to home all this is. So while I was working upstairs, so I was working in my kitchen during the evacuation, while I was working on all of this, and doing all this crazy stuff, and all these other crazy people work, I later found out, several years later, I went to a veterans event. So I speak to high school kids about joining the military. I give them great advice, too. I'll tell you the advice later. But I'll tell you in a minute. But so I'm sitting there and we're all telling our stories. It's a lot of school administrators, And there's this guy I've never seen before, and he goes, "Oh, my name's Mike. I'm in the Army. I just got out. I just came back from Afghanistan." And I go over, and I'm like, "When did you come back from Afghanistan?" And it's like August 31st. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So this kid was born and bred in Chelmsford, Massachusetts, where I grew up. And so talk about how tiny the world is, like how small the threads really are. Because you have this retired guy over here working on this stuff. Meanwhile, you have this National Guard kid from Massachusetts up there manning a wall. And he didn't come back great. It wasn't a great experience. And he was, I don't think it was the war those kids expected, right? So it's just kind of interesting if you want to think about like how big the world seems sometimes, and then like 2 years later you're like, well, and I'm really close to the kid now, so we keep touch. He's a firefighter, and I'm super proud of him. I'm super proud of him for like really being able to overcome that, because like for me, he's my hero. Like, and he's like, "You're a hero," and I'm like, "No, like, but you were there," like, because I would have done anything to be there. But I'm glad I was here and all that. And then,
that's amazing. I hope he's. Does he know of Operation Allies Refuge Foundation?
I will make sure he knows about it.
He should. That's all the guys that I've spoken with are part of that group, and they exist to help with the moral injury and to be there for each other, and just, I think a lot of HKI vets don't want to talk about what they saw, but these guys do, and they would think that sharing their stories is part of that process. And some of the stories that they've shared with me have broken my heart into a million little pieces.
Yeah.
So I think they're an amazing group. I always try to bring them up to anybody. That's the great thing that's come out of this. There are so many fantastic organizations that wouldn't have been born had it not been for the tragedy. So that's my spiel. But I want to hear about the pork chop, because to me, this is a story that and I want to hear about the pork chop in the broader sense,
Yeah.
You are dealing with this day in, day out on top of your regular job.
Yeah.
How the hell did you do it? How did you not lose your marriage? So many people did. I mean, they alienated themselves from their spouse, from their girlfriend, from their boyfriend, So tell me about all the messy personal stuff.
So this is a really great. So how did evac affect the household, right? So first, I'll talk about my family. So my family is actually really used to me. So I travel a lot, all that stuff. My wife is definitely a military wife. I retired in the Army 23 years out. So 2019, I retired. So she was used to me being away, and then like operations coming up. So when it first happened, and I got it, watching what was happening on TV, like my wife knew that something was wrong, right? Like I was sitting all the way forward, and I was like and I was like, oh my God, what is happening? Like things are happening, and it's getting worse, and it's getting worse, and it's getting worse. And so my wife reacted in the way she always does, and is like very supportive. She literally operated my life, her life, in the children's life, because they had school and stuff. Like, what was it, August? No school. But she had to manage their life anyway. So she was I don't even remember. Like, I don't remember that whole end of the month. So she was managing them and their camps and like all the stuff that kids do, and I had zero part of any of it. And I remember looking back on it now, feeling like, you ever see like a music video where like there's actually a scene in Scrubs where like you're standing still, but everybody's flying around you, and like and you're just standing still, right? Everything is just happening around you, right? And it's like, that's what it felt like. And I remember like my wife being like, you have to eat food. And I'll be really open with you. I gave up food and picked up nicotine packets, like just straight Zins. Like I stopped eating food. I stopped doing, like I wasn't drinking water. I was just drinking coffee. It was a straight deployment, right? Like straight back in the dock, working the problem, dipping it without the dip. And I remember my wife like cooking for me one night, and she cooked the dinner for me, and she's like, all right, I need you to eat. I got a bunch of stories about not being able to eat. But like, and she was like, okay, she put it on the table. She's like, please eat. Like, I need you to eat, da da da. She goes to bed. 3 a.m. I was eating that thing, like, and it was delicious. I mean, it was like an adobo, like, but it was still, like eating the cold vegetables. Another night I reached out to my buddy, and I was like, I hadn't been able to go to the liquor store. I hadn't left my house, right? And I'll tell you about how work worked it out. But, I went the first couple days to work, but honestly, they just gave me emergency leave, and they were very understanding. They were like, wow. My boss actually had been a refugee, so it worked out. Talk about things working out the way they're supposed to. But I called my neighbor. I texted my neighbor, and I'm like, look, bro, I haven't been able, he knew what was going on. Like, he knew there was stuff happening in my house. I'm like, I can't get to the store. I really just want some beer. Can you just drop some beer off at my house? Because I got you, bro, right? I got you. He's like, I got a 4-pack. I'll drop it off, da-da-da-da. I hear him like, I'm not even, and here's the worst part. I'm going to be an asshole. I can't even drink it with you. Because so I hear him come down my driveway, drops the beer off, da-da-da-da. And as soon as that gate closes and the beer drops, something happens on my screen. And it was, what white night was that? I could look it up. I think it was the bus incident night where we had a bus go crazy. Not the one that got kicked off the airport. There was another bus that got hijacked. I'll tell that story another day. But I think that's what happened. And I literally turned and went, oh shit, and started working. I drank that beer at 8 in the morning. I drank my...
Oh, Lord.
8 in the morning. I all night we were working. We thought we lost somebody. We thought somebody died. And I remember my buddy was like, how was the beer? And I was like, I don't know, I drank it for breakfast. And then I went to bed with a bunch of nicotine packets hanging out of my face. I was falling asleep on the floor. I was crying on the phone with people. When the country collapsed, I called the chief of staff to my congresswoman and literally sobbed at her and was like, these Afghans have no representation. Their governments collapsed and we're their only hope. And to their credit, that office, Congresswoman Lori Trahan, I will run through a wall for because she gave me her staff. Her staff had Cambodian refugees on it, and they turned around every piece of paper and made every phone call that I asked. And they knew that I wasn't going to stop driving. And I love them. I love Lori Trahan's office. I will support her as a congresswoman. She supports Afghans. She supports Massachusetts Afghan Alliance. And just incredible people that came together. I really love those people.
That's amazing. But that's hard. That's hard to go through. And I am so glad that you had that community behind you to help when things were not pretty, and who didn't just say, you're being crazy right now. Why are you, because I think a lot of people, that was the response that their spouse or their significant other had of you're nuts to do this.
Do you know how I asked for help? Do you know how I asked for help? I was like,
no,
this is happening. You have to help me.
Okay.
And if people were like, and they would pause and be like, remember when you said you support veterans? This is what I need right now. And people would literally do it. They would just be like,
wow.
They'd be like, oh, okay. I'd be like, this is an emergency. You have to do it.
Oh my gosh.
They'd be like, yes. And then they would do it. But again, I was super grateful. I wasn't mean about it, but I was like, I'm desperately asking for you, right? And if people were not immediately empathetic, I would be like, I'm dissolving as a human being. I need your help. Your help will do this one thing, and then this one thing will do this one more thing. This one thing will do literally begging people. That was
what were you asking them to do? What kinds of things?
Oh man, so I had one time I was trying to get a church to help me do paperwork, right, and they ended up not helping.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of annoyed with that. But the congresswoman's office, the senator's office, I would call and I'd be like, I need you to call this person, da 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 da, and I'd be like, that's how I would just literally say, this is what's going on. You have to do this. What else do we have? Mm-hmm. We would ask. Oh man, I got to think about what would I ask people for. Ask her everything. I called up a lawyer friend of mine and I was like, I need your help. You need to help me right now. And he'd be like, okay, I'll help you. Okay. I was having a significant mental breakdown in the middle. And it wasn't not obvious. People could tell. I was a train. I was a mess. It's probably what helped not save, we don't save. But it probably is what helped a lot of those people was that I was so manic and so crazy. But when did we usually ask for help? Mostly it was trying to get people to write letters or, reach out to Congress people or just anything to help. Sometimes it was with other groups, other Signal groups or Slack groups. We would get calls together to ask people for help. We would, the Special Forces. I wasn't the SOF. I wasn't part of the Special Forces community. I managed to talk to a guy in North Carolina for 2 weeks that helped me arrange stats missions. That guy was dope. I can't say his name, but he's dope.
Yeah. That's so funny. I definitely have one more thing I want to ask you about because I think it's another personal question that gets a little deeper into this.
Yeah.
So when you went through all of your, we were talking about this before I pressed record, you went through all this data. You had your WhatsApp messages with your contacts with Afghans, but you had deleted your Signal, where then that's what, for anybody who wasn't involved in that, Signal tended to be what U.S.-based people were using to contact each other because I think the Taliban knew about WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So it wasn't quite as secure.
Yeah.
And so people were using Signal on our side to kind of keep our chats more secure from that. Tell me about why you did that and what, what part of your process that was during.
Yeah, so after Evac, I remember there was this point when I was saving all the WhatsApp messages, getting them all together, and I'm actually done some archiving. I have like 300 gigs, and they're very people-centric. They're very people-centric around Afghans, because even though the people wanted us to use Signal, Afghans really relied on it, right? And it was, for the time, it was what we had to use. The Signal messages, which were incredibly personal, there were a lot of voice messages, memos, and I remember after Evac, like this thing sitting on my table, and it was my work laptop actually. It was my work laptop sitting on there and being like, and I took some stuff. I took some of the things that I thought were really important to me, and I didn't want to lose. But I formatted that computer and was like, I never want to look at this thing again. I never want to look at any of these chats. I didn't want to see any. And I lament this sometimes. I'm really, I wish I had saved some of those messages, because there was some real messages of like joy and like. In triumph, and there was some really deep ones of loss, and it was just a lot in there that I wish I had saved more of. But no, it was a little bit too much. And then right after that, right around the same time was Veterans Day. It was my first Veterans Day, and unfortunately, a lot of groups did stay together, and our group kind of broke up, which is not fault of anybody. It's just sometimes things don't pan out that way, and that was the most alone day I'd ever had in my life. Like, I didn't have my group. Evac was done, and I remember like that was, I didn't need any of that, and I just remember being really alone, and I remember deleting that and being like, that's enough, and then logging out of that Slack channel for the last time, which they eventually shuttered and all that stuff. But I couldn't look at it again, and I didn't look at my WhatsApp until just probably last year. I really didn't want to look at them, and I started looking at them because I started speaking more and talking more about the experience, because in those texts there were some of those rooms were about like really adult topics, right? And we're all adults here, and we know what those mean. There were murders, there were tortures, there were rapes, and those things were all in there. But there were also people getting through Westgate, right, and things like that. So those things were there too. Yeah. But it was too much. It was too overwhelming, and I just remember being like, I don't need this, and I don't want it. And I remember really being like, I don't want it. And then it was November. It was Veterans Day that year, and that was when I bottomed out, and that's when I started, somebody that I really care about kind of rescued me, like called me on the phone because I couldn't find anybody, and they picked me up, and then I started therapy and started working on taking ownership of the things I do own in Evac, but also letting go of ownership of the things I don't own, like my friend Basir that didn't make it out. Like, I don't own that. Like, it was just yeah. That's all I got.
God, that's so hard. I I don't think I've ever had to process anything with Afghanistan that deeply, but I can commiserate in other areas of my life of I can't look at that ever again because it'll destroy me all over again. Mm-hmm. And then once you've healed, it's like, oh man, I do want to see what brought me there and see those moments, like those joyful moments, and remember some of it because it made you the person you are. You wouldn't, and like it's, for everybody I've talked to about how terrible it was, I don't think anybody would say they wouldn't go and do it again.
I would do it.
Because of the intense camaraderie, the intensity of every single moment. Like you said, standing still while the world is going on around you, because what you're focused on is so deathly important. Yeah. And there are not many moments like that in life. In fact, everything that you have brought up is like something that I went through when my life exploded in front of my eyes as I went through my divorce. Yeah. I couldn't eat. I couldn't do anything. Everything at once. All the chatter in my head. That's what it was about. So I have had that experience, but it's just a different set of things.
Trauma's trauma, my friend. It's all
trauma is, and that's exactly what you're describing. It's trauma.
Yeah.
And we have to get through it. But what I love is that you turn that trauma into something. When you talked about coming full circle, it's like you had something to come full circle with because this mattered to you.
Yeah.
And all the people that knew, I don't think many people in my real life knew too much about what I was trying to do. I mean, my closest friends certainly did, but you had all these people that you tapped into, and now you get to tap into that again with Mass Afghan Alliance.
And talk about full circle. So Lisa was involved with the Hoover Institution. So Hoover Institution is run by Condoleezza Rice. So that is, if you go back to that bio at the beginning, so Liesl was the one that was like, hey, Hoover has a veteran fellowship. And now, because I know what a fellowship is, I actually was able to apply to that. And, Condoleezza Rice, General Mattis is there. General
Mad Dog?
Yeah, I met him. He's super. Yeah, I met him.
Oh, shoot. That's so freaking cool.
He is the type of retiree that reminds you of his rank, though. I'm the type of because I'm enlisted. I'm like, I don't give a shit about my rank. I'm tired. But he definitely reminds you that he's but I've seen him speak about Ukraine. We have McMaster, so General McMaster. So, the work we did in Afghanistan actually led to, if you want to talk about it really quickly, was, so this Condoleezza Rice, Condoleezza Rice, the Hoover Institution. So Liesl knew Condoleezza Rice. We kind of knew Hoover Institution had helped us with some of these cases, actually. HART, there's a team called HART, the Hoover Afghan Rescue Team, which was led by General McMaster. So when I did my application for the Veteran Fellowship, I was able to kind of reference back to those times. And we had actually helped, our group had actually tried to help one of General McMaster's friends, who was a general in the Afghan army, who had no legs, presented specific and unique problems for a case manager on the ground, which I can tell you, I'll have to tell you part of off the air, because it's definitely part of the story I can't tell here. But essentially, those connections were able to open up. So I was really fortunate, and while there was a lot of tragedy and trauma within Afghan Evac, like, look at the seeds that's planted, not just with me, like, forget about John Moses and Mass Afghan, look at, like, React DC and, No One Left Behind, and, like, all these incredible, amazing human beings that have really just come out and came together. And we're not a perfect family, and we fight sometimes, like, everybody's fighting for the Afghans, because we all effing love Afghans. So, like, it's been, I wouldn't have traded for anything. I wouldn't, those 68 people and the people we got after, I mean, like, I get pictures of American kids every, like, 3 months now. Like, I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. Not a thing.
Yeah.
Not a thing.
There's I don't know if you're a fan of Khalil Gibran, the prophet. He's a beautiful writer, and he talks about how the deeper sorrow carves into your being, like, the more joy you can hold.
Yeah.
And I have found in my life that the people who I like to spend the most time with are people who have really touched the depths of that sorrow.
Yeah. And
understand just what an amazing thing it is to feel then joy.
Yeah.
It's a unique group, and maybe that's the thing that unites all these Afghanistan people, is that we've really experienced that. Yeah.
They brought, there was joy in that. There was joy in that evac. There was joy in that evac. And I remember there were times where we laughed really hard. I remember there were times, even though it was hard, I remember emailing Jen Psaki and then getting a response, and then like tromping around my yard like I had conquered the world. And then Liesl and I gave her a nickname. We called her Jenny P. I was like, me and Jenny P are like best friends now. Like,
yeah, totally.
She didn't answer my email though. Like, I was wild. It was the closest I ever got to the president. It was the closest I managed to get. And boy, did I try to get past that one. I was like, I found a lever to get me to this person, and how I found her email, and she's gone now, so I can tell the story. Was she was like way down on an email chain, and I looked at every in that thing, and I was like, Jen Psaki. And I emailed her directly and was like, and I was actually advocating for an LPR. Her name was Narwan. She's in California. She had gone home to visit her dying mother, and the country collapsed. And she had a paper stamp, not the actual LPR card, so it really prevented her from getting out. And actually a group, Project Dynamo, helped get her out.
Oh, yeah. Very cool. That makes me think, we're talking about all these Afghans or LPRs who are back in Afghanistan. And that's another aspect of this that I don't think I've ever actually said out loud. A lot of Afghans went back to Afghanistan that summer because they thought it might be the last time that they would see their family. And because we were so adamant, everybody except for Bill Raggio was so adamant that the Taliban would not take over that quickly, things would not fall that quickly. People were in a dire situation who never expected to be in that. They thought, here's my one window. Here's my one opportunity to go see these family who matter so much to me before everything changes.
Right.
And they got screwed. And thank God there were people who gave up everything for those weeks, who ate Zyn packets were coming out of their face. And pork chop, ice cold, and drank beer at 8 a.m. so that they could, like, well, it's, yeah. I mean, and you are not alone.
There's one photo of me doing that. It's that I actually managed to take one day to like a couple hours to like see my friends, and then I went to my cousin's house to hold a baby. And as soon as I got to my friend's house, I whipped open the laptop and I had to start working. And then I ended up putting, I worked the whole time, and they took a photo of me. There's only one photo of me though from Evac, actually doing the Evac work. And it just looks like me at a laptop. And I'm like, that doesn't look like spectacular at all. But in that moment, I forget what I was dealing with. It was something big. And then I went to my cousin's house and I actually left the laptop and my phone in the car. And I was like almost 2 weeks out. We were almost at the end. And I remember holding my nephew, my cousin's son. And it was like this really grounding moment, and like being like, okay, like, and it gave me a little bit more to get through it. But it's just interesting, like those things you remember about, like where you tried to like make yourself sane.
Yeah. And it does. To everybody else, you do look like you're just working at a computer. You're just on a phone. I would get crap all the time about how I was always on my phone.
Oh.
And it's like, that's because I have people trying to have me help them not die on my phone.
How do you say no? I don't know.
All right, John, it has been an epic conversation. I know that there are still stories we have not covered, and maybe we can come back and cover more stories another time, because this is amazing. But I want to just let you sign off by saying, let's say you have the opportunity to relive this period.
Sure.
Would you do anything differently? And why or why not?
To answer your question, I don't think I would change anything. I think despite the hardships and the work that we did, I think the results kind of speak for themselves. I think the results of that, I met some of the best partners I ever met in my life. I met some of the best friends I ever met in my life in Liesel and the Evac fellows. It's opened up doors for me that I never thought would happen. I have, this really unique access to my congressperson now, because her and I staff got to work together, and we've been able to do that and pivot that into like more good things we can do for Afghans, because we can continue to give back. I think, if I was going to change anything, after the fact, maybe, the past 2 years, I think the lesson I learned is, be kinder, be more patient, I wish those things had been lessons that you kind of learned during evacuation, but they're not, and it took me a while to learn them. So I think the John Moses now is definitely a much more stable and happy version of himself. But I wouldn't have changed that crazy Zin dipping SOB that helped those 68 people and the Evac fellows get people. So.
Yeah, it's funny. I think about that. Like the person I was just telling my friend today, like I had been taking up needlepoint, and I was needlepointing a poppy scene. And I can almost pinpoint the exact day that I stopped doing that. And that was like my relaxing after, a crazy day of raising children and writing activity. It was in August of 2021 that I no longer had that time anymore. And I morphed into a version of myself that was on fire.
Yeah.
And I love her. But I miss and I've had to learn how to be myself again a little bit. Like I feel like that's exactly what you're describing, the learning to be patient, because the world is not revolving at the pace that Evac work did, and so you have to okay,
it's brutal now.
Everything is gonna but it's an adjustment. You're coming out of trauma, you're all of that, and I'm so glad that we got to dive into this. It was a really enjoyable hour and a half, and thank you for sharing those things and diving back into that hard stuff. And I'm glad that what we came out with, I think, is one of those stories that can help anybody anywhere going through a hard time. Remember that the time can make you better, actually.
Just get shit done, like the Evac fellows. That's what we do, right? So when it comes to your mental health after post-Evac and this work, we just get shit done now. So I'll never forget that lesson for sure. And Beth, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it as always. And I will see you soon down in the DC area.
Yeah, it's going to be super cool. Thanks so much, John. And to everybody else who's listening, I forgot to thank you all for listening as always. And Tasha Kaur, and hope to see you all again soon.